Hang on. We live? Sorry everyone, if you're watching this, we have some technical difficulties. Okay, well, this is supposed to just be me setting it up, but we've had a lot of trouble with YouTube, so we're just gonna go with this. So, I'm back. Channel Studio's having a lot of trouble, so I'm using the original streamer software on YouTube, and it's very different. So you'll excuse me for the history or for the hesitation there. Oh, I didn't even realize we were hopping in live already. Let me just set up these window panes here so I can see chat and myself at the same time. Come on. Oh, this thing is old and clunky. There we go. Good enough. Okay, and this can go up here. Why is this thing here at all? Pointless. Wow, well, I'm glad they have a new studio for this because this thing is interesting. But, okay, everything seems to be working. So, hello, we're going to be talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 44 for this stream. Another Nick Spencer written Spider-Man comic with Kim Jacinto and Bruno Oliveira doing the art, David Curiel coloring, and Joe Caramagna doing lettering. This is a pretty interesting comic on the whole. A lot of it is Spider-Man in the back seat, listening to this guy who can supercharge vehicles, and he's like a criminal, so he's like a getaway driver that can turn any car into like this supercharged thing. He talks about working with these crooks and them encountering like the Sin Eater who's back and growing these demonic sins out of people, and then this guy just constantly being on the run and driving his car all over the city, avoiding this villain who keeps showing up every time he tries to stop. And Spider-Man's in the back seat hearing the story. Then the Sin Eater shows up, the car all crashes, and Spider-Man wakes up, and it's like a horrible dream, I guess. And Spider-Man calls Mary Jane and talks about like how he was gonna ask her to marry him before like he missed meeting her before she left, how much he needs her, and he talks about like how he was on this podcast with Jonah during that one issue and how it got him thinking about these things. And then he starts to imagine all these rats and bugs erupting from his body and like vomiting out of him. And then that villain, I forget like if they've really said his name yet, but I've seen him quite a bit in these comics so far. Shows up and he's like talking about like how it's a dream within a dream and how it's a bit of a cheat, but it's not actually Spider-Man's dream. And then it turns out to be Mary Jane's dream. So, it's a lot of stuff happening all at once. I do have a lot of thoughts about all of this, and I'm not sure. I do feel to a degree this is a comic that really might have been, like, influenced me based on the pandemic, because it feels like all this stuff with this bug-based villain who's connected to the Sin Eater or is the Sin Eater, but like has this creepy version of him as well. I don't really know because I've been kind of in and out of these Spider-Man comics these days. It feels like this has been built up forever and they just keep going and going. And like I said, I think a big part of that is the fact that, well, we are dealing with like a new Spider-Man, a delayed Spider-Man series that has been dragged out for a long time. And I do think that's a bit of an issue. Clyde Frost is saying, oh no, it's an alternate reality Peter Parker or a clone of him. How very surprising. Yeah, it does kind of seem like that the way they set up things at the end. Because it's like the whole gang, I guess. Oh, they all had the nightmare? I don't know. Either way, so avoiding. Yep, you can all hear the dog out there, who will hopefully be quiet. Oh boy. Um. Anyways, otherwise, the artwork's pretty interesting. But yeah, if you get like, I really like some of the artwork. It's very dynamic and colorful, and everyone involved did a good job between the details on the figures and like there's a lot of Kirby dots in that image of the Simian Eater that isn't present in other panels and that sort of thing with more modern characters like the driver. Um, but and I do like Spencer's relatively dialogue light comic that's very symbolic and stuff. But I feel a better writer could have kind of dug into this stuff a little more quickly. A lot of this feels dragged out. And also, I'm really not all that excited about this new direction for Spider-Man. I don't really care about this new villain, and I haven't really gotten anything new out of them. CR7 is saying Spider-Man comics have been cash grabs since Ditko left, in my opinion. They are okay, but nothing like the Ditko run. I mean, they've certainly had their moments. I like Nick Spencer, especially when he was working with Ryan Otley, is really like on the verge of greatness. I liked the last issue where it's dealing with like him and Boomerang, like him and his roommates. That stuff with Spider-Man really works from Nick Spencer's run. And then they got a cute little pet out of that. I like that side of Spider-Man. This whole like epic new villain or whatever. I got nothing out of that. And to be honest, I don't think I'd recommend this book. I think I'm gonna drop it from my personal pull list for a while until like maybe the next story arc or something like that because from what I got out of this, which is pretty much all just setting up this next story arc, I'm not that interested myself. I think it could be better. So, yeah, a little disappointing in that regard. And personally, I could do get more out of this on the whole. And otherwise, yeah, pretty mediocre on the whole. Pretty disappointing after getting my hopes up that like maybe we could get more out of the Amazing Spider-Man comics under Nick Spencer. But I think we're kind of running into the same issue of Dan Slott, where it's like, well, if Spider-Man has to be single and he's just gonna spend this issue moping about not being with Mary Jane, and then the rest is just kind of setting up this generic villain, I'm not that interested in that book. I'm not interested in this book or that series that's going to be exploring this stuff in that direction. As much as I hate to say it, yeah, not a recommend for this particular Spider-Man comic, and I'm kind of going to pull out, at least for this Rising stuff, personally. Now, that does leave me kind of curious about what you guys thought of this issue or what you think about Spider-Man comics lately. A couple of you have kind of hinted in chat just now that you don't agree, or that, sorry, you do agree, and that you don't like this book that much either, or the direction the series is going. And that's a real shame because I definitely think this is still a step up from Dan Slott. I really think the artwork from Jacinto and Otley has just been awesome across the series. I like some of the other aspects of the series, like I said, with Spider-Man's roommates, Boomerang, and Robinson's kid, I think. And the stuff with J. Jonah Jameson has been a lot of fun. Spencer, I think, really gets the fun side of Spider-Man. Clyde Frosh is saying, to be fair, the Corona delay did grind this already necessary slow reveal to an unbearable halt. Yeah, I think that was my big impression, because it feels like this alternate Spider-Man, which I guess is what he's saying. I didn't even get that myself, but maybe he did say that somewhere. I'm reading this last page, or second last page again. I guess that's what they're implying here. Or maybe they said it somewhere else. But yeah, that coronavirus delay didn't come that heavily. But I'd like to remind everyone, myself included, that like all of these books experienced that delay in some form or another. Which means that every story arc that was currently in play is going to feel drawn out more than it was. But I have to say, while it has been present in other series, this feeling, it's not nearly as I should get more in frame. It's not nearly as in play with other stuff. Like Death Metal and all that Justice League stuff got built up across that. That happened with Justice League's personal series and a lot of the other books we've talked about and some of these streams over, like Empire feels like it's been built up forever because of that. But the feeling isn't unbearable because I think this series already had issues with its pacing. this villain, whoever he is, has been built up for a long time now, and there's nothing to him. Like, I've never been given a reason to care about this guy. Like, oh, he's got creepy bugs. Gross. I don't want to watch that crap for like however long in a Spider-Man comic. That's not what I've liked out of the Nick Spencer comics so far. But I think for all their fun, they're lacking like that sort of emotional hook where it's like, oh, I really care about Spider-Man supporting cast and stuff. I do care about Boomerang now. I can say that, but he's kind of comes and goes, and I think that's right for his character. But we need a more robust supporting cast, and for a book like this that's just about Spider-Man, it kind of highlights what's wrong with that in this series and the direction in Spider-Man in general. I think more than ever, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be with Mary Jane, but there's got to be something. Aunt May, or like some of his friends, ranging from either like someone like Johnny Storm and the Iceman, like I'm thinking from the Ultimate Comics, or, you know, his Peter Parker's actual friends, of which there are many from different eras of Spider-Man, either his peers back from Horizon Labs / Parker Industries back when those were things, or that sort of thing. Retro Kid Review says, so one more day getting undone or what? You know, I want to say no, because it feels like if they were going to do that, they would have done that already. But, like, I don't know. They brought up Mephisto again in this story, and those events again. And he's, like, holding the wedding ring while he's talking to Mary Jane. It feels like they aren't ditching the topic, which makes me think, well, maybe there is something going on here. Clyde is saying, I'm glad the delay didn't happen while the Batman comic was just wasting time with those dream sequences leading up to the... Oh, God. Yeah. I still haven't fully read through all of Tom King's nonsense with Batman. I gave up a little bit after the wedding. Not immediately after the wedding. Like the first wedding. And so I've kind of clued into what happened, but it's just like that gets into some of the issues with more modern comics and how they pace things out. We've been reviewing a lot of older comics through the Spectre lately, but really go through any older comics, and even some writers these days, and they're a lot more effective at getting content done within a single issue. I do think there's value in the more modern comics attempts for ambience, and this comic's a great example of really having more ambience than plot to it. Like, a lot of these pages are just... Oh, we're flashing back here. Okay, maybe not. But it feels like a lot of time is spent here with just Spider-Man, like, riding around in the backseat of this guy's car. And that's not going to progress the plot along that quickly, but that was the most interesting part of this whole thing. And the fact that it ended up being a dream kind of took away from some of the more interesting content going on there. But, like... in this amount of time, however many pages this is, probably 20 or 24, whatever it is, it changes and I lose track, but this is the $3.99 book, so I guess like 22 or whatever. Whatever it is, in that amount of time, like decades ago, they could have put in so much story into that like same Spider-Man content, and we would have lost the like ambience and setup a little bit, but I think there's more of a middle ground that can be reached with a lot of these books. Tom King has that problem, Nick Spencer has that problem, and a few other stories. Someone just brought up Dan Slott, he has that problem. But not every writer has to have that issue, and not all of them do. Some of them make very good use of their time. I think Tom Taylor's a good use of that. I was fawning over him yesterday in my Joker 80th anniversary stream. Retro Kid is saying it's not like Dan Slott teasing away like he used to during his run, even a year plus later. I still feel Nick can get it done. Yeah, Nick Spencer, I don't think, would just bring that stuff up for no reason either. He's a smarter writer than that, and not, like, antagonistic, borderline, the way Dan Slott could be. Spencer, I think, has a better sense of this sort of stuff, and does a better good job of it on the whole. Yeah, so, it's been a long time since we talked about Spider-Man. I'm not surprised that chat kind of got into it a little bit. And that even some of those names I haven't seen in a little while. That's on me for not talking about Spider-Man as much, but you can kind of get maybe why that is. That I've kind of, sort of hop in and then hop out of this series, because I haven't been 100% on board, and I still think we're kind of finding our footing. I absolutely would argue this is all still better than Dan Slott. Like, even on a relatively weak issue like this, I'll take this over Dan Slott's Spider-Man any day. And we still have a lot of stuff to talk about with Dan Slott this week, so I won't get into that too much. And maybe that's a good time to call it there. So next up, we got Robin 80th anniversary here, a book that's actually been out for a while, but I haven't talked about yet, and it kind of ticks off the last little thing in my 80th anniversary spree of reviews. So we'll do that on a different stream, and I'm gonna see if I can get the proper format working, because this didn't schedule it out right. I try to at least give you guys some warning of when these streams are coming out. I scheduled it, tried to get the stream to working, and it just went live right away because we're not in the control room I'm used to using. So we'll see when this comes online. YouTube's having issues today, so it's kind of messing around with my originally planned schedule, which is a shame. But yeah, so we're going to take a step back and talk about our last DC comic out of what I pulled. And then I have quite a few more Marvel ones to talk about, and hopefully we can get through at least some of them today, if not all of them. So stay tuned for that. The turnaround for these should be pretty quick, but that really depends on how the studio is going to cooperate with me. So I'll let you guys know how all that goes. And until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you shortly with Robin